The world of Dungeons & Dragons is one marked by ancient mysteries and stories of old. But what if the inspirations it took from were just a little bit more recent? Hi, I'm B. Holder, and this is Cryptid Chronicles, the show where we take a look at modern-day folklore and figure out how to put it into your D&D 5e game. Today, we will be taking a look at the Sasquatch, otherwise known as Bigfoot. There are many ape-like cryptids from around the world, but the Sasquatch is one centered almost entirely within the mountains of the western United States. In future episodes, we'll be looking at other ape-like cryptids, such as the Yeti or the skunk ape, but today we'll be focusing entirely upon the Sasquatch. Stick around until the end of the episode, and I might even have a free goodie for you to use in your own D&D game. Let us start by exploring exactly what a cryptid is. You may already know what a cryptid is, but for the uninitiated among us, a cryptid is a form of modern-day folklore. A cryptid is a creature that some believe exists, but is not yet proven. There are many famous cryptids from all over the world, from the Yeti to the Chupacabra to the Loch Ness Monster to the subject of today's video, the Sasquatch. Cryptids are an interesting source of monsters in your D&D game for a number of reasons. One of them is the sense of mystery that they bring with them. Cryptids are mysterious by nature, so adding them into your stories, hidden just beneath the surface of your world, can add a lot of depth and intrigue, and make your adventures all the more curious. Another strength of using cryptids as a D&D monster is their recognizability. Your players, when they come face to face with a creature from modern-day mythology, are likely to recognize it, and likely to respond and connect with it differently than they might an ancient being from centuries past. Seeing a dragon for the 1000th time in your D&D game might be fun, but there's something special that happens when your players encounter a cryptid from modern-day folklore. But could this modernity that comes with cryptids actually be a downside, not an upside? That brings us to our next point. While they are extremely interesting, do cryptids really belong in Dungeons & Dragons? Most monsters within Dungeons & Dragons either trace their origins to days of old, or were created specifically for the game. But modern-day cryptids fall in neither of these categories, usually. From dragons to Medusas to unicorns, most folklore-based monsters in D&D trace their origins hundreds or thousands of years ago. Meanwhile, cryptids usually only trace their origins a few hundred years ago, or even only a few decades ago. Cryptids still have a presence in our modern day, as creatures some believe to exist. So how can something so recent, so modern, exist in a traditional fantasy setting? Well, for one, a cryptid has already made its way into D&D 5e, in the form of the Yeti. But the Yeti wasn't just transplanted into D&D. No, it was adapted. This idea of adapting cryptids into D&D, instead of simply transplanting them, is what makes them work as a concept in a fantasy setting. There are thousands of cryptids from all over the world that can make a real impact at your table, but it seems only right to start with one of the most famous of all. Today, we are going to be reimagining the Sasquatch, taking it from mysterious cryptid to D&D monster. But before we can do that, we must take a deep dive into the history of the Sasquatch to figure out how to best adapt it into D&D. Within legends surrounding the Bigfoot, the creature is most often described as a large, hairy humanoid with a bunch of ape-like qualities. The beast is usually pictured as being covered in brown hair, with only its face, hands, and feet being without it. Its feet are often large and prominent enough that it was even named after them. But stories of an ape-like creature making its way through North America is not a recent phenomenon. The Sasquatch myth can actually trace its origins back to pre-colonial Native Americans. I apologize in advance for any of the names that I'm about to butcher. On the Tule River Indian Reservation, there's a set of carvings that seem to depict a family of Sasquatches on a site known as Painted Rock. These carvings at Painted Rock are referred to as hairy men by local Native Americans, and they date back 500 to 1,000 years ago. Other Native American tribes speak of Bigfoot-like creatures, such as the Cherokee, who speak of the Sul-Kalu. The Lumi tell tales of the Semi-Quests, while the Alatek tell stories of the Nantinak. During the 16th century, Spanish explorers and Mexican settlers told stories of creatures they called the Dark Watchers. The Dark Watchers are tall humanoid figures who are only seen in silhouette that are said to ominously watch over travelers. Perhaps the Watchers will star in their own video someday, but in the meantime, some theorize that these strange figures are actually further evidence of the existence of Bigfoot. In 1924, a group of prospectors claimed that they were attacked by a group of ape men after one of the prospectors fired a shot at the weird creatures. The ape men then attacked the prospectors by hurling large boulders and rocks at both the prospectors themselves and the cabin they were staying in. During the battle, one of the prospectors was knocked unconscious by a boulder. The prospectors fled from the cabin in the morning and reported the incident to the authorities. The U.S. Forest Service did an investigation of the area, but found no evidence that any battle had occurred. The cabin was left undamaged, and no large boulders were seen displaced at the scene. Despite the lack of evidence, the area surrounding the cabin became known as Ape Canyon. In 1958, a logging company found large humanoid footprints in Humboldt County, California. After a bulldozer operator found the initial footprint, other workers reported similar footprints in the surrounding area. Mysterious events had started happening around the worksite, which the workers blamed on the strange creature who left those footprints, a creature they named Bigfoot. One of the footprints was cast, and this cast was used as evidence for the existence of the creature. Newspapers printed stories of a creature they called the Bigfoot, and the Sasquatch was forever associated with its large appendages. In 1967, the Patterson-Gimlin film was shot by its creators, who it is named after. This is quite possibly the most important piece of Sasquatch evidence. The film is 954 frames long and runs for just under a minute. But during this minute, the pair of filmers caught on tape what appears to be some sort of ape-like creature moving through the woods. This piece of film contains the most famous pose of the Sasquatch, which has since been replicated thousands of times. This famous piece of Bigfoot mythology spread through the media like wildfire, and Bigfoot went from local legend to household name, featured in everything from movies to TV shows to video games, and soon, Dungeons and Dragons. There have been many attempts over the years to either prove or disprove this piece of film, but even 50 years after its creation, it still remains a mystery. In 2002, the family of a man named Ray Wallace, who had worked in Humboldt County on the logging site, revealed wooden feet that he had carved and kept in his basement for years. His family admitted that Ray Wallace had used these wooden carved feet to create footprints around the site as a prank. But by 2002, it was too late. Bigfoot had already become a sensation. Between the stories of the Native Americans, the Ape Canyon incident, the Patterson-Gimlin film, and the footprints in Humboldt County, Bigfoot had cemented himself as a cornerstone of Americana folklore. There have since been thousands of sightings of ape men in Western America. While many of these sightings have been debunked, the Sasquatch still stands as a staple of American mythology. The perception of Sasquatch has undergone a transformation in the eyes of the public. Initially, the Sasquatch was a figure of Native American mythology, maybe a protective spirit or a watchful giant. European explorers perceived the Sasquatch as a mysterious aspect of the New World. After the Ape Canyon incident, the Sasquatch became known as a malevolent threat to civilization, hiding in the woods. But in recent years, the Sasquatch has undergone yet another transformation. It is no longer a malevolent force, but a representation of the beauty and mystery present within nature. The key to adapting a cryptid into a D&D monster is to take the aspects that define them and recontextualize them into a fantasy setting. The defining aspects of the Sasquatch can be broken down into three things: its connection to nature, its mystery, and its threat to civilization. So what exactly does a D&D Sasquatch look like? The Sasquatch is a mysterious creature that can be found in places secluded from civilization. Most often they dwell atop daunting mountains or deep within hidden woods. The Feywild calls out to the Sasquatches, and as such they can often be found within the land of Fairy as well. Not all believe that the Sasquatches actually exist, as they are said to be incredibly elusive. Most stories spoken of the Sasquatch are told by terrified villagers, nervous hunters, and frightened adventurers. Many claim to be attacked by the Sasquatches, but these attacks are often attributed to orcs or hill giants. It doesn't help that Sasquatch sightings are only reported in regions of wilderness where physical evidence is hard to come by. Those who do come across the ape-men claim that they were able to duck into foliage with surprising ease and disappear from sight without a trace. Occasionally, adventurers will have claimed to have slain a Sasquatch, but when asked to provide a body for proof, they admit that the body had rapidly decayed upon the Sasquatch's death. While the Sasquatch lacks any physical evidence besides strange footprints it leaves in its trail, the sheer number of reports makes some suspect that the creature is more than just a myth. Scholars who do believe in the Sasquatch theorize greatly about its origins and its nature. The Sasquatch are not a species of great apes or uncontrollable monsters. Instead, they are a race of ancient giants. None truly know the origins of the Sasquatches. Some scholars suspect that they were once ogres granted intellect and other strange gifts by some sort of nature spirit. Other theories state that they were once furbolgs who crossed into the Feywild and were shaped by the strange magics there. While their origins are unknown, their existence in the modern day is better understood. The Sasquatches are thought to live in tribal communities by those who believe in them. Sasquatches are often seen alone in the wilderness, but in groups when they make attacks against settlements. It is often believed that Sasquatches who travel alone in the woods are hunters or gatherers for their communities. But those groups of Sasquatches that attack settlements, those are war parties. Some druids claim that they were once allowed to live with Sasquatches for a time. These druids state that the Sasquatches are indeed intelligent creatures capable of community and speech, although they only speak the tongue of their peers. Bigfoot tribes are organized around multiple spiritual leaders instead of one central figure. A Bigfoot tribe is made up of a number of families, each of which has a shaman who leads the family itself and helps lead the tribe as a whole. The number one concern of any Sasquatch tribe is to maintain their territory. A Sasquatch tribe's territory is not just their home, but their sacred domain that they are sworn to protect. A Sasquatch tribe swears an oath to protect their land under the watchful gaze of some ancient power. The specific entity that a Sasquatch tribe swears this oath to varies from tribe to tribe, but most are ancient elementals or powerful fae. Some Sasquatch tribes make this vow to no entity at all, but instead to the very land itself. This vow to protect their land defines the lives of most Sasquatches, who do whatever it takes to keep their home safe. This vow can often lead to conflict between Sasquatch tribes and humanoid settlements. Settlements only fall under threat of attacks from Sasquatches if a Bigfoot tribe decides that that settlement is a threat to their territory. A town that thrives from the lumber taken from chopping down a huge section of a Sasquatch tribe's territory is a likely victim of a Bigfoot attack. Same goes for a group of hunters who are over-poaching the animal population of a Sasquatch domain. The Sasquatch is a force of balance, fending off civilization that is encroaching upon their territory. Sasquatches are unlikely to attack druid circles or other similar societies, but they will enforce balance when humanoids attempt to dominate a Sasquatch's domain. While a Sasquatch is a force of balance, only striking at those who pose a threat to their homes, they can be quite ferocious when it comes to dismantling their foes. If a Sasquatch tribe sees a village as a potential threat, they are likely to attack the village until it ceases to be a threat, without caring for the individuals living inside of it. While lumberjacks living in a village may be the ones destroying a Sasquatch community's domain, they will see the entire village as a potential threat, and will likely attack any member of that village, even those who are completely disconnected from lumber. This makes Sasquatches a common fear for many living on the outskirts of society. The Sasquatch is a guardian of the wild corners of the world, and while they are not monsters, they are certainly a threat to those who menace their homes. This lore is pretty neat, I think. I tried to make the Sasquatch a cryptid even in a fantasy setting. I think there are many ways that both a DM and a player can make use of this creature, but before we get into that, first we have to see exactly what this cryptid can do. When converting the Sasquatch into D&D, there are a ton of things I had to consider, and one of them was the fact that it's not just a random monster, but is actually an intelligent species capable of thought and complex tactics. I always think it's strange when D&D has just like one stat block to represent an entire species of intelligent creatures. Surely different members of a species would undergo different training to suit their, strengths and interests. So I've designed 3 different stat blocks to represent the Sasquatch: the Stomper, the Boulder Tosser, and the Shaman. But before we can get into how each of these stat blocks are unique, we first have to see what makes them all similar. While these different stat blocks represent ways a Sasquatch might specialize, they're all still the same species, and as such share a number of features and actions. In my D&D interpretation of a Sasquatch, one of the most important parts of their lore is that even in a fantasy setting, their existence is still called into question. This implies that the Sasquatch as a species is incredibly elusive, and so their stat block has some abilities to reflect this fact. Every Sasquatch has a trait called Cryptic, which gives it advantage on stealth checks. Additionally, this trait causes them to dissolve into nothing 1 minute after their death. This lines up with stories taken from our real world, where hunters will claim to have slain a Bigfoot only to watch it disappear before their very eyes. Within a D&D campaign, this prevents player characters from slaying a Bigfoot and using its body to prove the existence of the Sasquatch definitively, and instead, the Sasquatch gets to remain a mystery to the greater world. Sasquatches can also hide as a bonus action, which can allow them to strike out at their foes before disappearing into the brush. Or maybe they'll hide and dash on the same turn, allowing them to make a sudden escape. The last features all Sasquatches gain access to all relate to their big feet. All Sasquatches have a stomp attack that does a bunch of damage, but only works against creatures unfortunate enough to be prone next to them. All Sasquatches also possess a trait known as big-footed. This trait makes it more difficult to move or knock prone a Sasquatch, so long as its feet are firmly planted on the ground. While this feature is unlikely to show up, I just thought that the Bigfoot needed a feature that referenced, their big feet. These features are all shared by the 3 stat blocks I created, but now that we know their similarities, it's time to get into their differences. The Sasquatch Stomper is as close as one can get to a standard Sasquatch. Other intelligent creatures in 5e tend to have at least one basic stat block. Think the stock standard Goblin from the Monster Manual. The Sasquatch Stomper is meant to be the front line in any encounter against Sasquatches. The Sasquatch Stomper's defining ability is its slam action, which can knock hit opponents prone. I like to imagine this attack as being the Sasquatch picking up their opponent and slamming them into the ground, or maybe just a really mean punch. This slam attack can combo with their stomp attack, making them quite formidable to be within melee range of. It also gives them the title of Stomper. Stompers are excellent at stomping people, but they're quite mechanically simple when compared to the other Sasquatch stat blocks. While the Stomper is the foot soldier, the Boulder Tosser serves as the artillery. The Boulder Tosser is an ability where it can toss a boulder at range, which can both push back and knock prone enemies. This gives the Tosser a bit of battlefield control, allowing them to kite foes, and also set up their Stompers to step on them, unless the bard is into that. The Boulder Tosser can also throw a whole bunch of boulders in a large radius. This can both damage opponents and knock them prone. This effect is on a 5/6 recharge, like a Dragon's Breath weapon. The Tosser has less hit points than a Stomper, as they're designed to be harder to reach than their melee counterparts. Sasquatch Shamans are the spiritual leaders of their tribes and communities. They are also the spellcasting stat block. The Shamans focus on battlefield control, with many of their abilities knocking opponents prone and setting up their allies for stomp attacks. While the Shaman is a spellcaster, instead of giving them a big old spell list, I decided to give them unique actions. This makes the Shaman a bit easier to run for DMs, as it doesn't require you to flip through dozens of spells to make sure you're casting the optimal one each turn. It also makes the Shaman a more unique combatant on the battlefield, as they possess spells and abilities entirely unique to them. While these effects aren't spells the players will gain access to, they can still be interacted as if they were spells cast at the level listed next to them. This means they can be counterspelled, dispelled magicked, or any other similar effect. As the spellcaster of the group, they are the most complex type of Sasquatch to run in combat. They can summon forth a spiritual hawk as a cantrip, which does some damage to opponents and harries them. Being harried by the hawk can put a character under the feather, as it grants them disadvantage on saving throws and ability checks until the Sasquatch's next turn. The shaman can summon a tree which then falls over, which can both damage opponents and possibly knock them prone. The shaman has a reaction where it can push opponents back with a burst of defensive wind. This defensive reaction is triggered by a successful attack against the shaman and can also knock opponents prone. This pushback, knock prone combo is a good way of preventing more melee attacks coming from the affected creature. This burst of wind is a great foil against your barbarians and paladins, if they fail a strength saving throw. Their last big spell allows them to summon vines, which can both knock prone and grapple opponents. A nasty little part about this ability is that the grapple condition reduces a creature's speed to 0, and a creature needs to use half their speed to move up from prone. But if you have no speed, you can't use half of it to move up from prone, so you're just stuck on the ground, grappled, prone, ready for stomping. I think these stat blocks are pretty cool and cohesive, and you can see how they might work as a team. But cool stat blocks are only worth anything if you can use them in your own game. What are some ways that you can use the Sasquatch, both as a DM and as a player? In order to use the Sasquatch in your game as DM, you first must understand the conflict that Sasquatch brings to the table. The main conflict that defines the Sasquatch's stats and lore is the conflict between nature and civilization. Sasquatches can serve as physical representations of all the danger and mystery found within nature. Even as I record this, I can't help but think of the edge of the woods, the shadows and the darkness, the mysterious kind of feeling that you get when you're looking at the tree line, and you just wonder what's out there. That mysterious feeling that you sometimes get when looking into nature, that's the feeling that the Sasquatch can invoke. Mystery in nature is the core of the Sasquatch, so understanding that core and how it reflects against civilization is how you can craft some really interesting stories using the beast. If you wanted to run like the classic Sasquatch adventure, I'd have your players arrive in a mining town that borders a forest, and when they do arrive, they find that this town had recently been attacked. They find like displaced boulders, destroyed buildings, and fresh graves in the graveyard. When the villagers see this group of adventurers wander to town, maybe they'll come up to them, explain that last night they were attacked by strange creatures living in the woods, and they'll offer to pay the party handsomely if the party can find the creatures and defeat them and stop them from destroying their town altogether. Then the party sets off, explores the wilderness, finds signs of Sasquatch inhabitants, including footprints, maybe hair follicles, and eventually discover that the Sasquatches were behind the attack. But what will they do when they discover the Sasquatches aren't just monsters or raiders? They're a organized group of people just trying to keep their home safe. You could have a druid spending time with the Sasquatches explain to the party that the Sasquatches only attacked because the miners were using black powder to blow off the tops of mountains, which were causing landslides and other ecological disasters, destroying the Sasquatches' homes and killing Sasquatches in the process. You could also have, the Sasquatches speak common and tell the players this directly if you want to go that route as well. The miners are unwilling to stop their operations because there's valuable gold veins buried deep within the mountain, and the Sasquatches are unwilling to flee from their home, their land, the place that they are sworn to protect. The Sasquatches are only defending their home, but they're willing to harm or kill anybody from the mining village, even if they're not directly responsible for the attacks on the Sasquatches' land. This conflict between the miners and the Sasquatches can only end one of two ways, and so the players have to make a choice. So what will your players do? Will they side with the mining town, or will they side with the Sasquatch tribe? Will they side with civilization or nature? And ultimately the choice in this moral dilemma is up to them. While this would be like the classic, Sasquatch D&D adventure, there are a ton of other plot hooks a DM can also use. Perhaps an eccentric noble has hired the party to go into the wilderness and capture a Sasquatch alive to serve as the crown jewel to his oddity collection. Perhaps instead the party is tasked by a captured Sasquatch in a freak show to help them escape into the wilderness, and if they do, he'll give them a powerful nature-themed magic item. This adventure could be a really unique and fun prison break, where the party is helping the Sasquatch break out of a circus. And so all the enemies are stuff like clowns and circus animals and strongmen, and of course the nefarious ringmaster who's pulling all the strings. In all of these adventures, the player characters find themselves on one side of the conflict between humanoids and Sasquatches. As a player wanting to use a Sasquatch in your backstory, it may seem less obvious exactly how to employ Sasquatches than if you were a DM, but trust me, there are many interesting ways to do so. Perhaps your character was abandoned in the woods as a baby, and instead of being raised by humanoids, was raised by Sasquatches. A character raised by the tribe's shamans may grow up to be a druid or a cleric. Meanwhile, a character trained by stealthy Sasquatches who specialize in hunting may grow up to be a ranger or a scout rogue. Perhaps your character swore an oath alongside their Sasquatch family to protect their lands, making them an Oath of the Ancients paladin. You may think that a Sasquatch-raised character has no reason to leave their homes to become an adventurer, but trust me, there are many. Perhaps one of their big-footed family members were captured by humanoids and they need to be rescued. Maybe an important river that runs through the Sasquatch's territory has recently been dammed up, and your character must travel there in order to destroy the dam before the lack of water can cause serious ecological damage. Maybe instead, your character is a druid who is allowed to live with a group of Sasquatches for a time. Perhaps this druid has the goal of visiting 4 different Sasquatch tribes, each one living in a wildly different environment, and of course, each of these tribes are themed after an element. They do this to learn more about Sasquatches, so that maybe this knowledge can be shared with humanoids, and people can learn to respect Sasquatch territory. On the flip side, maybe your character is a man of magic, who seeks to put their names in the history books forever by proving the existence of the mysterious Sasquatch. This cryptid zoologist may set off with the goal to capture a Bigfoot and prove their existence, but what will they do when they find others attempting to capture the creature for themselves? What will they do when they discover that the Sasquatch is not just some mysterious monster, but a race of giants just trying to protect their homes? Will they go through with it and capture one? Will they try to thwart other wizards? Who knows? You do if you decide to play that character. Whether a DM or a player, this Sasquatch can bring a special air of mystery to any game. I think all of that is pretty neat, from their real-world history, to their in-game lore, to their statistics, to how you can use them as both a DM and as a player. I hope that you can see exactly how you might use this famous cryptid in your D&D game. There's a link in the description below to a Google Doc, featuring all the stat blocks I designed for today's episode. If you enjoyed today's episode, please drop a like and subscribe, because that is a huge help for this channel. If you want to support the channel, and also get some pretty cool stuff for your D&D game, I've linked down below a couple of things I've released under the DM's Guild. Please let me know down in the comments below exactly what cryptids I should look into for future episodes. I'll see you all real soon.